Good day, everyone. Welcome to Sydney, Australia. We're here today for a National Corvette Restorers Society, NCRS Judging Chapter meet. With me on my left, Murray Foreman, President of NCRS Australia, and Gary Wilkinson. Welcome, guys. What we want to try to accomplish over the next couple of days is to document and to show how cars are judged to NCRS standard. But many of us have been to show and shine and different car shows. And Gary, I'd like for you to maybe explain the difference between just a normal show and shine car show and what we might see over the next few days for the NCRS Judging Chapter.
Yep. The main issue, or main difference, I guess, between our judging process and show and shine is that we do work very much towards a standard that's set out, clearly defined, technical manuals and the like, and we're very much more objective than subjective. As we've probably all experienced at some show and shines, there's a few judges there maybe that are a little bit less experienced in certain areas. They've got to go by their own experience, etc. We've got the ability to go to standards that have been put in place and effectively give us the opportunity to bring the cars to a level as delivered from the factory. So that's essentially the main difference, and the process that we follow is quite detailed, concise and objective.
The show and shine, a car can win the show because somebody likes the color of that car or the interior, it's got more chrome or something like that. It's really not the case with NCRS, isn't it? It's a very concise set of guidelines.
We can actually deduct points, to say, for cars that are over-restored. Our technology today exists with paint systems, two-pack, base coat, clear coat, etc., versus back in the day, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, where we're using acrylic lacquer paint systems. So a car can present today on a field that is in much better condition cosmetically and mechanically than it was ever delivered from the factory.
If I could just jump in here for a second and say that these cars here today are being judged against a standard. They're not being judged against each other. It's not like the normal scenario in a show and shine where the cars compete against each other. Here, they're competing against the standard and they all can be winners.
And I'd like to also remind our viewers and point out that the motto or the vision for NCRS is one of the restoration, preservation and enjoyment of the Chevrolet Corvette. Now, enjoyment isn't just having our vehicles sitting in displays in the trailer, etc. We drive them.
Well, guys, listen, I really appreciate you being here today. We're going to see a lot more of each other over the next couple of days.
Right.
And so let's have a great time.
Yes.
And let's show our viewers what NCRS is all about. So the next thing we should do is meet the owners of the cars that are going to be judged this weekend. Let's have a look.
Yeah, hi guys, my name is Trevor Jones. I bought this 59 Corvette out of America in Washington State 11 months ago, and the car was fully restored in America, and I must say they've done a very good job on it. I've always wanted a Vette. I'm a chrome freak. If it hasn't got chrome on it, I don't like it. The 59's got plenty of chrome on it, so it really thrills me. It drives lovely. It's a good club car. It's a 283 cubic inch V8 with two Carter 4-barrel carburetors, and it's 270 horsepower with a Duntoff 097 camshaft. It's got a 4-speed manual transmission and a posi traction rear end of 3.7. I joined NCRS through a mate of mine up on the north coast of Brisbane, mainly to find out if there is anything wrong with the car, and so I can push the car to its boundaries and have it as close as possible to original.
Hi, my name is Terry Roos. I'm from Queanbeyan, New South Wales. My car is a 40th anniversary. I've owned it for 7 years. It has an LT1 300 horsepower. The colour is ruby, and that was because it was a 40th anniversary. And that's what I like about the car, is the colour. As you can see, this is an LT1. It's a 350 cubic inch, 300 horsepower. It's all original, and that's how it came from the factory. I own 5 cars, and out of those 5 cars, 2 are Corvettes. Out of all my cars I own, the Corvette is the one I like and like to drive the most.
I'm Jessica and this is Ali, and this is our 1960 Corvette called Babette, and she came from America about a year ago and we bought her in Ohio. And I did always know that I wanted this car because I saw one when I was 10 years old in St Kilda in Fitzroy Street, and I had hold of my father's hand and I said, "Gee Dad, what's that car?" And he said, "That, Jessica, is a 1960 Corvette." And I have never forgotten that car and I've always wanted one. I never thought that I'd get one and had sort of ruled it out really as one of life's little compromises that one makes. But then the inevitable and very boring, midlife crisis, 45-year-old health issues sprung up, and I thought, well, bugger it, we're going to do it. And luckily I've got a husband who's very understanding, and he let me borrow the money out of the mortgage. What a great guy. Part of the preparations for getting ready for judging is taking off the distributor shielding so that the judges can see the distributor underneath, which is part of the electrical system, and also the air filter. This is so the judges can get in and see the carburetors. Mine's a little bit dirty because I drive my car. The next thing you have to do for judging is to remove the tyre, the jack, the tyre iron and the jack handle. This is so that the judges have got a clear view of the wheel well, and also that they can see most of the fasteners and stuff that have been used in the boot. And then the last thing to do is give her a clean.
When you have your car judged by the NCRS, it's actually judged in 5 different sections: the interior, the exterior, the chassis, the mechanical, and the operations. And there's a judging sheet for each one of those 5 sections. Along with that is an in-depth judging manual which helps you to score against these judging sheets. What I also have here is a judging manual covering the years 1958 to 1960. NCRS produces a series of these manuals for various year cars. Now let's move to the table of contents. Starting with operations, you can see how this section relates directly to the judging sheets for operations, beginning with ease of start and so on. If you require additional information about this particular section, simply go to the page indicated on the table of contents, and in this case, page 1. The judges also use this handy standard deduction guideline sheet to help further clarify the judging of certain sections such as engine block cylinder case, batteries, tires, etc. Now, it's not as complicated as it all sounds, and to simplify this, I'm going to pass this over to Gary Wilkinson that's going to explain this a little more in depth.
Thanks very much, Lon. The flight judging process works as I've highlighted on the board behind me, broken it down into the basic categories. So we start with 4,510 points for each vehicle, and then as we determine components or aspects of the car differ from the standard, we then deduct points. Broken down into 5 categories: chassis, mechanical, exterior, interior and operations. Each category having a points value which tallies up and totals to the 4,510. So the first 4 categories are pretty straightforward. They're mechanical components and paint systems, etc. The last area here, operations, is one area where NCRS does differ from a lot of judging systems and processes elsewhere, where we do look at the functional, operational aspect of the vehicle. Things like when the car starts, does the cold choke operate, the windscreen washers work, the wipers work, headlights, etc. All operations components. And you can see too, it's got an equal level of relativity to the other areas, 730 points versus 894 interior. So quite highly valued aspect of our judging process. Within those categories, we then break it down to component level and split between originality and condition. Each of equal importance, 50%, 50%. So on the originality side, that's where we're looking at, do the components appear as if they may have been originally installed at the factory? We're not actually asking that you judge that they are the original part. Some parts are original, some parts are restoration, some parts are new old stock. For example, this is, after all, restoration, preservation and enjoyment of the Chevrolet Corvette, and this whole process has been built to cover that. The next aspect is condition, and that's cracked weather strips, torn seats, flaking paint, rust, corrosion, etc. Bearing in mind too, we go through this process, we allocate scores, etc. But one very important aspect is the judges mark down where the components differ from the standard. So the owners can then take that information and use it however they wish. They can make their cars more closely represent the standard or just be aware of their deficiencies. The flight judging levels are explained here on the board behind me. 94% or greater achieves top flight award, 85 to 94% receives second flight, and 75 to 85% receives third flight. Other award categories that aren't being judged this weekend are Sportsman, Mark of Excellence, Performance Verification, Bowtie, Founders, Samfoals. That's it.
So what does it all mean? When you bring your car to the NCRS for a weekend of judging, you have a couple of members looking at your car for maybe 24 man-hours, and you walk away with a detailed summary of what's right and maybe not so right about your car. You can do with that what you like. At the end of the day, at least you know what's up with your car.
Well guys, I'd like to thank you today for bringing in your cars for this Sydney chapter meet. We will look after the cars to the absolute best of our ability. I'll instruct that the interior judges do not sit inside the cars. They will use knurling pads outside the cars. The mechanical guys will have fender covers on, so we'll protect the paint. The other judges are just walking around the external, and so it'll be okay in that area. But once again, thank you very much for bringing your cars. We really appreciate it.
Welcome everybody to Rudy Hill, chapter meet for NCRS Australia. Thanks very much for coming along, and we'd just like to give you the judges briefing for today before we commence the session. Just like to remind everybody too to treat the vehicles as if they were your own when you're going through them. Being careful not to damage the vehicles in any way. Also too, not to actually climb inside the vehicles or kneel on the seats and that kind of stuff in case we create any damage. So. Also too, just like to remind you of this standard deduction guidelines, was the sheet here that you can all have a copy of, which will help give some clarity around some of the aspects of the judging.
Well, I'd just like to say thanks guys, I really appreciate your attendance here. Without your attendance, we just can't do these chapter meets, so once again, thanks very much. I've sat down and worked out a few of the areas an indication from judges what they'd like to do, so I'll just run through. David, I'd like you to do the mechanical on the 60. Joy and Wendy, can you do the interior on the 60 please? Dicko, right. Thanks Richard. It's a pleasure, it's a pleasure. Trevor, you got a minute please? Could I introduce you to Greg? And I'd like you to judge the exterior on this car.
So we've got Colin and Dave here. Now guys, you're judging Jessica's 1960 Corvette. What section are you working on right now?
We're doing mechanical.
So you're doing the mechanical section. And which part of the mechanical?
Item one, we're determining whether the engine is the original engine as per the guidelines that was produced with the automobile. So there's a great deal of information being given to us here to read and identify the engine by numbers, codes, dates, casting numbers. And this is a very large portion of the originality of the car, and there's a great deal of deductions if you haven't got the correct engine. So it's very important we find out these things are correct.
Yep. Now I noticed, Colin, in the first section, engine color, for example, right? There's two areas here, 20 points and 20 points.
What we have here is we have a situation where the engine was painted in a certain manner when it left the assembly line at the engine plant in Flint, Michigan. This particular engine was constructed.
Right.
Now, when they produced this engine, they did have certain components on it which were painted with the engine.
Oh, right.
Now, to determine that it has been restored correctly or is original, those paint markings are important.
Right. Now I notice here there's been a deduction of 4 points.
The exhaust manifolds on the engine were on the engine when it was painted. These were early days painted on, so there should be a remnant of paint on the exhaust manifolds.
Right.
The transmission bell housing was on the block, and there should be evidence then that the engine was painted with that on there. So it's not a clean finish, which this particular car has. So in other words, this car has had the engine painted correctly with the correct colour, but it hasn't had some of the components on it which it should have had.
Right, so basically it's got a minor deduction for a few of those things. Now the next area in the mechanicals on here is engine block. And I notice there's quite a high number of points on this.
This is very important.
Well, firstly we check the casting number, which is located on the back, and that tallies up with what we've got in our judging guide. Secondly, we check the casting date. You probably can't see this on the camera, but that's where the casting date is on the back of the block. And in this case, the number and the letters were D50, which again, according to the judging guide, correlates to the 5th of April 1960.
So it means it's correct.
Well, it's dated prior to the build date of the
Oh,
car.
I see.
So
right.
yes, it's correct.
Right.
It's approximately 6 weeks
It's
between.
within the possibility.
Yeah, obviously you wouldn't have a date that was after the date the car was built. So,
That's right.
and probably not a date that was the exact day that the car was built. So yeah.
So that tallies up, which is 175 points.
Assembly stamping is next.
Assembly stamping now, this is a very important one also, and this is located on the front of the engine pad, and you can see it right here.
Right.
And it's a very important piece because when the mill ran these engines, they had a dry mill which went across the block to surface the block, and it left they call broach marks, which are very fine grooves in the cylinder case, and those grooves are, or should be always, evident in this little pad here, because that pad that you see there with the number on it is actually the head surface of the block.
Right.
So those are, up till very recently, have been very hard to reproduce because all modern day mills clean blocks from the opposite direction.
Are broach marks good
Yes.
or are broach marks bad?
No, you must have them.
Right, so it shows you that the car is original.
Well, it gives you an indication that the block hasn't been machined.
Right, right.
That's the big thing.
All right. Well, guys, listen, I'm going to let you get back to your work. I know you got a lot more to do here today, and thanks very much for your time.
You're
all right?
welcome. Thank you.
You've just seen the detailed mechanical section of a 1960 Corvette, which is very accurate, very original. What I'm about to show you now is a 1958 Corvette, which is not being judged today. However, if it were to be judged, it would receive deductions on certain components, which I'm going to show you now. So the motor that's installed in this 1958 Corvette, as you see here, is a 327 motor. The originally came with a 283 motor, so that's the first major difference with this vehicle. That would receive a full deduction for the motor. As well as that, the owner has decided to install a high-performance air cleaner. The rocker covers have also been highly polished, although they're correct in that they're aluminium. There's some chrome added to the motor as well on the water inlet, fuel inlet lines, and probably the other most significant change on this vehicle is it's fitted with performance HPC-coated headers instead of the cast iron exhaust manifolds. So all of these things that I've just highlighted that are incorrect do not preclude this vehicle from being judged. And in actual fact, the owner of this vehicle has had this car judged previously. It went third flight. He's decided for his reasons that he'd like to keep the configuration as it is, a high performance motor, etc. Looks pretty good. So, and that's fine with us. We really enjoy having these vehicles as part of NCRS judging process too.
Not all cars that come to the NCRS judging meet are judged. But there's one car that's here today that's been a favorite of mine for a long time. Just check this beast out. This is one of my favorite cars, mate. Tell us about this car.
This is a 1968 Tri-Power big block, big bumper, which was originally imported from Denver, Colorado, approximately 3 years ago. The vehicle was partly restored, and over the first 18 months I ended up restoring it and completing the job.
Now, Ronnie, this car is not being judged today, but you've had it judged previously, is that correct?
Just brought it in for display purposes, and it has been judged, and it has received a top flight on the first time out.
Right. Now, Ronnie, I'm guessing you were probably a Corvette enthusiast before you got this car here. Tell us a little bit about, you know, what it was about the Corvette, why you bought this particular car. Just give us a little background on what brought you to this particular car.
Well, this is the second Corvette I've owned. The first one I owned was a 1984 C4, and I eventually sold that and traded for this, and saw it in America. And as I said before, I imported it and finished the project off.
And as a driver, is this something that...
It's a little bit rougher on the road than the 84,
Yeah.
of course. There's a lot of years between 68 and 84 that makes the ride a lot different.
Yeah, but the power plant is quite a bit different than the 84, I'm assuming.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is a 427, and this is how they produced them in 1968. this is how they come off the assembly line.
So, Ronnie, listen, I really want to thank you for bringing your car here today because this is one of my favorites. I was really looking forward to seeing this car, and at this event. And so, thanks very much for being here, mate.
Okay, thanks very much,
Appreciate
Lon.
it, yeah.
Thank you.
Now we've got Andrew and Brent. Guys, you're judging Trevor's 1959 convertible. What section of the car are you working on?
We're doing the chassis section at the moment.
Right.
Okay, and when you start on the chassis, it starts with the electrical part of the chassis.
All right. And so I noticed that the first part of the electrical system is the generator assembly and so on. Total points for originality is 18. And for condition is 16. Now I noticed there's no deductions on either one of those columns of this car. So, talk to me a little bit about why you felt that there was no necessity to deduct any points there.
Firstly, when we judge for the originality part of it. So we use the manual to help us there.
Right.
The manual tells us what part numbers for this car for that year.
Right.
So we've checked the part numbers on the tag, and that was to be correct.
Right.
Then there was other things that we can check with the red tag on some notations it has on that, and then we checked the sorts of bolts used and brackets. Then the condition is all about cleanliness, how it's put on. Is there, when you've done the bolts up, the nuts torn or any thread damage or anything like that? Once again, it's in perfect condition, so we didn't take any points.
And hence no point deductions.
No points deduction.
Yeah. Well, guys, I know you got a long day ahead of you. I'll let you back to it. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
See the yellow contact adhesive around the edge?
Now, weather stripping, this is always something that just horrifies people with the cars like this. They're saying there should be some evidence of glue beyond the rubber seal.
Next, steering wheel.
373.
So that would be right, January, February, March.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. Yep. 3739653. Yep, there it is.
The other is held in place with a kick panel screw.
Yeah, the judging's really intense and I'm a little bit worried. But I hope we're going to do okay.
So, Greg, you're doing the exterior on this 1960 Corvette. Can you just tell us a little bit about the detail work that you're doing here?
Yeah, well, we've noticed that the gap on this side of the boot is narrower than it is on this side. But we've talked about it and the inconsistency with these cars with their fit and finish. That could be a factory finish. So we're not going
within factory tolerances.
Within factory tolerances. So we're not going to be too hard on this car. The points that we give the car, that'll be taken into consideration. Something else I'd like to show you is another inconsistency in the build quality and the gap on these cars. This gap here is too big. When you compare it to the other side, it probably might be more acceptable. Okay, Gary, this is where we've written down the deductions for the fit and finish on this car. Door does not close correctly, sticking out on the top corner.
Yeah, that's great. So now the owner of this vehicle can use this information to either make the corrections if they seem fit?
Yeah, it'll be a big benefit to him when the event is finished.
Yeah, great.
Well, now we're here with Harry and Dicko, and they're judging Terry's 1993 convertible. And guys, show me what section of the judging are you at with this car?
We're doing interior.
Doing interior,
and
right.
At the moment we're having a look at the deck lid.
Oh, right, so the deck lid. Now I notice here from the judging sheet, there's 5 points on here for originality and 5 points for condition. But I see what looks like 0.5 point deduction.
0.5
So would that be a half a point?
Yeah, correct.
Right, so very, very minor deduction.
Yes.
And tell me a little bit about what it was that brought that 0.5 points in.
There's a little bit of wear on the deck lid on the underside of the paint.
All right, so we'll take a look at that. But listen, thanks very much, guys. Now another car we have today that's also not being judged for flight judging, but it's here on display in the sportsman class. This is a gorgeous 58 Corvette that belongs to Brent Carr. Brent, tell us a little bit about your 58.
Well, the 58 I bought in 1992. It was a wreck. It was a basket case. When I first saw it, it was a shell, an empty shell sitting on a frame. It did have wheels on it, and it had door handles on it. That was about it. So everything you see, all the chrome, the bumpers, the windscreen, the insides, none of that was there.
Wow.
And what we did have, though, was the engine over on another part of this warehouse,
yes.
Transmission over there,
yes.
And 2 cardboard boxes about that big with some bits and pieces in it. And not all of them were actually for the car.
Yep. Now, Brett, something I've noticed on this car, steering wheel's on the wrong side. Or is it on the right side?
It's on the right side, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, this car has been converted.
It has.
Yeah.
When I first started the restoration in '92, the law in New South Wales was that you had to have the steering on the right-hand side.
All right.
Other states had already passed laws allowing left-hand drive cars, but New South Wales was a little late in that. However, the restoration took about 13 years, and between the time I started and the time I ended, they actually changed the laws.
Right.
So in effect, I really didn't actually have to, but it's there now.
Now, the car has been converted to right-hand drive. If you were to have it flight judged, because you started that conversion before the cutoff, I'm assuming you would not get any point deductions for that conversion?
That's correct.
The C1, the Circa 1 cars, are the straight axle cars. We didn't see the independent suspension until '63. Tell me what it's like driving this car.
Well, it's very different from driving the cars as you can imagine today.
Yeah.
The good part of it is the engine, the power, the sound.
Yeah.
The other side of the story is trying to steer the thing.
Yes.
So the power steering is by Armstrong.
Yes.
And you're trying to wheel this thing around. Trying to park it is a real issue.
Yeah, I bet.
But once you get it on the road, on the highway, and she's moving along, just a beautiful feeling.
Now, Brett, I'm really glad you brought this to the show today. It's a beautiful car, beautiful example of a C1 58. And thanks very much for sharing that with us, mate. Thanks.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers, then. This brings us to the last and one of the more critical sections of the judging process, the operations. As Gary mentioned earlier, this is where the judges look at the functional aspects of the cars. First, the judges will introduce themselves to the owner of the vehicle, and they will request that the owner cold start the car. This allows the judges to check that the motor will start quick and smooth, and also that the automatic choke system is functioning properly. Then it's on to the windows to check that each door glass will travel unrestricted during both the up and down cranking motion.
Close to me in the very top. Yes.
Next to the air vent, making sure it will open and close smoothly throughout its three-stage travel process.
One notch down, that's correct. Just go to the first stage, second stage, or the third stage. Okay, back down, one more look. Seat, just move backwards and forwards. Correct.
Let's check that the factory keys will operate the glove box, spare tire lock, and the doors.
Beautiful.
Over to the music. No CDs or MP3s required here, but vacuum tubes are a must in these older Corvettes. So let's check out the radio, if you can find it. Trevor?
That's beautiful. That's what we do. Keep equipped. Now the engine must stop straight away, as they say here. Turn it off. Correct. I like that.
Beautiful.
Way it stopped. Okay, you won it.
Excellent.
Now the final process in NCRS judging is the judges will bring the score sheets to the team leader. The team leader will then sign those sheets, and they'll call the owner in. They'll discuss with the owner any specific deductions that might have taken place on those score sheets. The owner can then take that information away, possibly improve his score the next time he brings his car for judging. The score sheets are then brought to the tabulation table. I'm sitting here now. I'm joined by Wendy Foreman, who's doing tabulation for us at this judging meet. Welcome, Wendy.
Hi, Lon.
Wendy, tell us a little bit about what you do when these sheets come to your table here.
Sure. It's very easy. You just make sure that there's no discrepancies on the sheet, and you make sure it's all clearly scored. There's no misunderstandings. You do a final tabulation, and then I hand it to a second tabulator, and she has to tabulate it, and then it's given to the judging chairman, and he will sign it off.
Well, Wendy, your job is a pretty important job here. I mean, you're the one with the calculator in your hand, and you're the result of the final score. So we all have to be very, very nice to you.
Absolutely.
When you're doing your tabulation. Listen, thank you very much today for
My
joining us and
pleasure,
showing
Lon.
us what you're doing for NCRS.
No, a pleasure. I love it. Thank you.
Well, we've met the owners, we've checked out the judging process, and we've seen how the scores are tabulated. So let's find out how the three cars did this weekend. And don't forget, at an NCRS judging meet, everyone's a winner.
Well, people, thank you very much for your attendance here for the NCRS meet that we've had this weekend. We've had some great cars and some great participation, and I've really enjoyed myself, and I hope you guys have had a fantastic time as well. It's great to see support, because without your support this chapter would die. Over this weekend we had 3 magnificent cars to judge, and it's a credit to their owners and the presentation on how they put those through. So the first recipient I'd like to call up is Jessica. Jessica, we'd like to present you with the second flight. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, just with the ribbon, with the second flight ribbon, do you plan to take that? You're going to take that home with you, and look at and go through your judging sheets? Are you eager to get a top flight award for that car?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think Murray just told me that I was 0.1 off a top flight. So, you know, that's pretty amazing, I think, for a car that, you know, has never been judged in Australia before. Yeah.
So I guess the next time out,
yeah,
we might
absolutely.
see you with a blue one in your hand?
Well, I've got to get a shed built so that I can, you know, have a Sheila's shed.
A Sheila's shed.
Where, you know, girls come and work on the Corvette. But yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Jess, listen, you know, it was great to see you this weekend.
Yeah.
Congratulations on the award, and we'll see you the next time around.
Okay,
thanks, Jess.
Thanks a lot.
Trevor, would you please come up? We'd like to present you with the top flight ribbon. Thank you, Trevor. That's fine.
You had your 59 judge today, yes?
Yes, I certainly did.
First time out?
First time ever.
And tell us the result of that.
I got People's Choice.
Yes.
And the car got top flight, first up.
That is fantastic, mate. Congratulations.
It sure
on
is.
That. Yeah, I mean, a clean sweep for you.
Oh,
you know, 3 out of 3.
I'm just so happy.
Yeah, you'd be very proud of that.
I am over the moon.
Yeah, and mate, thank you for coming here tonight, and we hope to see you again at the next meeting.
You certainly will.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
And the last one is Terry. Bruce, would you come up and receive your top flight ribbon? Thank you very much, Terry. Magnificent.
Terry, congratulations. Top flight award for your 93. Is first time out for you?
First time out, thank you very much, yes.
Was the award a surprise for you? Or?
Very much, yes.
Yeah, well,
very much.
Congratulations, mate.
Thank you very much.
All right, cheers. Well, here we are, folks. The lights are up and the curtains dropped on this weekend's NCRS Australia Chapter Judging meet. Now, the processes that you've seen over the past few days are based on NCRS standards that are suitable worldwide. We might be in Sydney, Australia today, but what you've seen is just going to give you a glimpse of what you might see if you go to any NCRS chapter meet in the US or anywhere else in the world. So if you're a Corvette owner or just considering your first purchase, visit an NCRS website to find out more about this fantastic organization. But on a personal note, what I've seen this weekend is not just another car judging meet or a show and shine. I saw a lot of people that really care about each other, friendships, camaraderie, and ultimately the cars. So a very big thanks to them, and a big thanks to you for watching.